of our hearts are broken. And it looked like something out of an action movie.
My husband woke me up this morning. He said, "Rest the key bridge is gone." I couldn't believe it. I'm heartbroken.
News 4 is working for you, trying to answer some of the big questions about how it happened, the Mayday call that saved lives, and the massive ripple effect it will have on your everyday life.
Just seems to have been the worst possible for what happened.
You're watching the News 4 Rundown.
A state of shock. That is how Governor Wes Moore described the state of Maryland after a cargo ship collided with a pillar supporting a part of the Francis Scott Key Bridge in Baltimore and caused it to collapse. Thanks for joining us for the News 4 Rundown, our newscast streaming for you. I'm Sean Yancey.
And I'm Tommy McFly. It is Tuesday, March 26th. It's not just the state of Maryland that's in shock tonight, really the entire nation, as we can now report that 6 construction workers on the bridge at the time of that crash are presumed dead. And just moments ago, the Coast Guard announced they're officially moving from search and rescue posture into a recovery operation.
Take a look at this dramatic
My.
the moment the ship hit the bridge's supports, and then the bridge appeared to crumble, then collapsed into the Patapsco River.
Oh, wow.
Here's a timeline of what we know happened. A cargo ship known as Dolly left the port of Baltimore for a 27-day journey just before 1 a.m. Now, the ship's short journey, you can see it here along the Patapsco River. According to marine traffic tracker vesselfinder.com,
Thanks for tuning in. Grand Rising.
And expected to arrive April 22nd. But at 1:24 a.m., the ship's lights began to flicker and someone made a mayday call. Maryland Governor Wes Moore said that emergency call gave officials enough time to begin closing the bridge to vehicle traffic before the ship slammed into it, and it likely saved lives.
The Coast Guard received initial reports of the collision just before 1:30. It's a 948-foot container ship. It hit the bridge. It collapsed immediately. People who live nearby described that moment of impact.
Woke up to my house vibrating, and the big bang is what woke me up out of bed. The whole house vibrated like an earthquake. It was like an earthquake hit. And the bang was unbelievable, like a bomb went off. It sounded like a bomb.
Grand Rising.
Over the next few hours, an intense search and rescue effort ensued. Officials announced that at least 8 people were on the bridge at the time of the collapse. 2 people were pulled out of the water at that time.
And again, crews are now in recovery mode, looking for those 6 other workers who were on the bridge. The construction company told us, as we reported, they are presumed dead. Again, well, in an update this afternoon, the NTSB said its top priority is supporting all the people affected by this tragedy.
Right now, it's about people. It's about families and addressing the needs of those that were impacted. That's the focus.
Now, according to the Maryland Transportation Authority, as many as 31,000 vehicles used that bridge every single day. Now, all of those people will be forced to find alternate routes.
That bridge is more than 1.5 miles long, so high in the air, it carries Interstate 695 over the Patapsco River. Adam Tuss has been talking to drivers and taking a closer look at the impact on traffic.
In an instant, everything changed.
Holy, and was like, the bridge is gone.
Carrie Johnson says her fiance heard the loud bang of the collapse early this morning, but it wasn't until the sun came up that the true devastation was revealed.
And it's gone. What you typically see of your everyday skyline is just gone.
Barbara Bunn says she's been over the bridge by car and under by cruise ship. It always made her nervous.
I don't like crossing bridges. I don't like driving across the Bay Bridge. I mean, I don't like heights anyway, but even going under it, it was a little scary. Because on the cruise ships, everybody gets up on the front to watch it.
Pictures from Baltimore City fire crews show the scene up close. The weight of the bridge and the wreckage tangible through the photos.
Wow.
Meanwhile, the transportation impact will be long-lasting. 31,000 vehicles per day use the Key Bridge, 11.3 million vehicles per year. Maryland Transportation Secretary Paul Wiedefeld says I-95 and 895, 2 tunnels under the Baltimore Harbor, will likely pick up the spillover traffic.
About double that use the Harbor Tunnel and double that again use the Fort McHenry Tunnel. So basically, we got those 2 other options. We'll make sure that we have as much personnel out there to deal with any incidents, because as you know, that can cause backups very quickly.
Signs over I-95 as far north as Delaware warn drivers about the bridge closure. Transit alternatives will be studied here. Now, years ago, when a ship hit and knocked down a bridge in Tampa, it took over 6 years to rebuild a bridge in that location. And as time goes on, prayers continue for a miracle for those still missing.
It's been, way too many hours now. So, that chance is getting smaller. That window's getting smaller and smaller for survival. And it's sad. It's really very sad.
An early morning tragedy that has rocked communities all along the water. And back here now along the water, you can see a crane being moved in position on a barge, presumably to get as close as it can to the ship. And we can see the ship again stuck there in what was left of the Key Bridge, almost frozen in time from earlier this morning. And the cleanup is going to take some time. Guys, think about this. If we lost the southeastern part of our beltway, that's essentially what's going on here in Baltimore. 695 is the Baltimore beltway. So what's going to happen with a lot of the traffic that would have come to this southeastern section? It's either going to go through downtown Baltimore, through some of those 2 tunnels that we were talking about.
Thanks for joining.
The western side of 695. That's the part of the Baltimore
Thumbs
beltway that
up.
goes through Towson. The transportation impact.
And please subscribe.
A long time to sort out. Guys, back to you.
That will take a long time, Adam. Thank you. And when you think about that, downtown Baltimore is going to get busy. Those neighborhoods are going to be even busier. So
wow,
it'll be interesting to see what officials do to try to, reduce the impact.
Yep, and folks who live or work in Dundalk and use that bridge every day to get across, a lot of changes for the foreseeable future. A lot of big questions of the collapse remain tonight, and these questions we're probably not getting answers to anytime soon.
Now, earlier today, our Jumi Olabanji spoke with a George Washington University professor who's an expert in bridge engineering. He shared his thoughts on how the collapse may have happened.
Here is the model. This is the 3 supports. This is span number 1, which is a short span, and this is the long span, which is actually for this bridge is an arch, and this is the 3rd span. So unfortunately, the ship hit this support and over here and toppled the truss, which is supporting the traffic of the support, and even the pier over here is badly damaged. So right now, this bridge, after you remove this center support over here, is spanning between this point, and this bridge is not designed to span this long distance.
The collapse is blocking what is essentially a cargo ship gateway to the port of Baltimore. From there, the goods travel up and down the East Coast. So the ripple effects of this catastrophic crash are already being felt across our region and could last for months, if not years.
Our team coverage continues with Mark Seagraves. He has more on exactly how the tragedy happened and what it means for exactly that shipping industry.
Unfortunately, the loss of power at this exact moment was the
wow,
problem because
that looked like a movie.
They're under the bridge and perhaps run aground. The timing just seems to have been the worst possible for what happened.
Sal Mercogliano, maritime historian and host of the YouTube show What's Going On with Shipping, has reviewed the video of the moments leading up to the catastrophic moment when the ship struck the bridge. The first sign of trouble seen in the video is the ship going dark, apparently losing power.
That means every system on the vessel went offline, and that is the worst feeling for a mariner on board. Silence and darkness is the worst. That means you've lost propulsion, you've lost steering, you've lost control of the vessel.
Seconds later, the lights come back on.
What we're not sure about is whether or not that is the main power coming back on or the emergency power coming back on. If it's emergency power, that means they don't have control.
Then, thick black smoke is seen coming from the ship's smokestack.
That's usually an indication that they're trying to back down the engine, that they perhaps may be wanting to try to slow down and stop. We know that they do drop the port anchor because we see it down in the video footage, but at the speed they were going, which is about 8 knots, that anchor would not do anything. It would just drag on the bottom. That was a desperate move to try to stop the vessel.
Officials have said the ship was moving at 8 knots when it hit the bridge.
100,000 tons at 8 knots is a lot of momentum, and it's very hard to control it when you lose propulsion and rudder control.
The impact of the indefinite closure of the port of Baltimore will be felt across the nation.
The ships that are in Baltimore are stuck, and the ships waiting to get into Baltimore are either going to have to wait or divert. And we're talking about tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of dollar of impact of cargo. It's not just a matter of we'll offload in Norfolk or Philadelphia. You need the facilities to be able to take them. Cargo is going to have to be rerouted into Baltimore that was scheduled to arrive there. And again, the coal and grain that come out through that port is not going to be able to be taken up in other facilities. The facilities just don't exist.
We are just getting understanding of all of this. Mark Seagraves, thank you for your reporting on that. And tonight, President Biden is vowing to rebuild the bridge and send federal funds.
Yeah, the president and Maryland Governor Wes Moore made it very clear there is a long road to recovery and rebuilding ahead, but they said the state will prevail.
I've directed my team to move heaven and earth to reopen the port and rebuild the bridge as soon as humanly possible. And we're going to work hand in hand with the support of Maryland to support Maryland whatever they ask for. It's my intention that the federal government will pay for the entire cost of reconstructing that bridge.
This will not be short. There's going to be a long road. There's going to be a long road, not just as we go from search and rescue.
This is just devastating.
There'll be a long road as we talk about what does the future of this region, the future of the area look like.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to need each and every one of them. Just in this time, this state has been able to show what it means to be Maryland tough and Baltimore strong. And this state and this city will continue to show exactly that.
Not only is this collapse devastating for the families involved and all the people it will affect, the bridge has a very rich history. It opened up back in 1997. The bridge is one of two in the D.C. metro area named after Francis Scott Key, the author of the Star-Spangled Banner. He was inspired to write that song after witnessing the bombardment of Fort McHenry in 1814.
This is no ordinary bridge. This is one of the cathedrals of American infrastructure. It has been part of the skyline of this region for longer than many of us have been alive. So the path to normalcy will not be easy. It will not be quick. It will not be inexpensive. But we will rebuild together.
Now, the bridge was considered a huge engineering feat when it was built back in 1977. People from that area describe this bridge as a staple in the city skyline that is now missing.
And Baltimore's mayor is calling today's collapse an unthinkable tragedy. News 4's Juliana Valencia spoke with residents who say they're heartbroken over the loss.
My husband woke me up this morning. He said, "Chris, the Key Bridge is gone." I couldn't believe it. I'm heartbroken. I've got so many pictures of Key Bridge. They're all over my phone.
The Key Bridge was Priscilla Thompson's favorite part of her apartment.
This apartment's not much, but it had that steel.
The view of what she calls a work of art built by people she knows. Priscilla is part of the same ironworkers union that built this bridge.
It's the pride of Baltimore, that Key Bridge. Not only just what it signifies as far as Francis Scott Key and the national anthem being written right here at Fort McHenry, but as an ironworker, and to appreciate that for the structure, the magnificent engineering and workmanship that went into that.
This more than a mile-and-a-half structure has been a major thoroughfare, part of Baltimore's Beltway for close to 50 years.
It's like an old friend. You know, it just, you know, every morning I go, no matter what the temperature, or even if it's raining, you know, I go out there, stand along the fence, look out there. Sometimes I even go down onto the pier. That's where I go fishing at.
There's a lot of heartbreak here on what's been lost. The concern over this as a commuter route will be dealt with. The focus now is on those still missing.
My heart goes out to these families and everything. They had people that were on the bridge and all. I just never really, you know, seen such devastation like this.
In Dundalk, Maryland, Juliana Valencia, News 4.
And again, the Coast Guard has just informed us moments ago that they're moving from a search and rescue posture to a recovery effort. And the boats will be in the water overnight monitoring conditions. And the Coast Guard also hopes to have divers in the water as early as Wednesday morning tomorrow.
News 4 will continue to follow this story both on air and online. You can find all of the latest information on NBCWashington.com and in the NBC Washington app. All right, now here's a look at some of the other top stories we're following tonight. The Supreme Court justices are hearing oral arguments in a case that could limit access.
Okay, here we go.
We're coming on the air this hour with some breaking news out of Baltimore. This is where the Francis Scott Key Bridge has collapsed after one of its columns was hit by a cargo ship. The Baltimore City Fire Department says it is unsure how many vehicles were on the bridge when this happened, but there was a tractor trailer on it. Take a look at this video. CBS's Jared Hill is here with more on this story. Jared, this video just so dramatic.
Oh, I mean, this is unbelievable, Chanel. Looking at this video where you see the ship hit one of the columns and then the bridge just collapsed into the water.
A major bridge in Baltimore, Maryland has collapsed. This happened just before 1:30 a.m. A cargo ship was seen crashing into the Francis Scott Key Bridge, sending a huge section barreling into the water. The bridge is more than 1.5 miles long, and officials earlier this hour gave us an update. We learned there that 2 people have so far been rescued.
We heard just within the hour that the person who was transported here and treated here following that bridge collapse has been discharged from shock trauma. We've heard from shock trauma officials that there will be a press conference from physicians within the next 20 minutes or so. Now, because of HIPAA, they're not going to be able to
Thanks for joining.
information on the patient, who the patient is, and the types of injuries that they had and that they were dealing with, but they are going to discuss how the hospital was prepared for this mass casualty incident and how off-duty shock trauma staff contacted the hospital and offered their assistance, as well as them being a world-class leading integrated trauma facility. I know we talked about a lot of things that made this rescue effort very grim, such as the visibility in the water, the temperature of the water, like we've said, below 50 degrees makes it very difficult to survive, and that's assuming that your head is above the water and that you can breathe during this time. You know, these 2 individuals were rescued pretty shortly after the initial collapse. One of them actually refused medical treatment. I guess they walked away. They weren't seriously injured. The other one was seriously injured and arrived here at shock trauma in serious condition, but it is hopeful that they have been discharged.
People miles away reported feeling the ground shake, the explosive impact jolting them from their beds.
Well, I was sleeping. About 1:30, I felt the vibration of the house vibrating and heard the big bang come down. Looked out on the water, as you can see. You see the ship out there sinking. The bridge is gone, and it's unbelievable, unbelievable. I've been in this neighborhood 57 years. I remember when they started building that bridge, and can't believe it's gone.
I heard a very loud noise. Felt like, or heard like thunder to me. However, it's like very long thunder, but it was very loud. I live not too far from here in Dundalk, so I thought it was thunder or possibly a train.
Crews worked for hours in the dark, cold Patapsco River to rescue those who plunged into the water. Members of a construction crew repairing potholes on the structure.
I hope every single one of them's okay. I prayed for them. I'll continue to pray until they're found or okay.
Investigators will look at all aspects of the ship and the bridge. This is video from our WJZ crew that passed under the Key Bridge 11 hours before its collapse.
My dad, he takes it in the middle of the night to basically like right in the morning, because that's what time he gets off. So I imagine him going over that bridge at like 11 a.m. Like, it's got to be crazy.
I'm sure you're going to hug your dad when you see him.
I am. The biggest hug.
The port remains closed. Traffic rerouted. Many simply cannot believe the Key Bridge is gone.
You know, we go through a lot. Sometimes Baltimore gets a bad rep, but that's the one amazing thing about our community. We all come together and we fight, especially in times of need and tragedy like this one.
Nicole Skanga has been following this story for us all day in Maryland. Nicole, great to have you with us. You have some new reporting about what happened on the ship in the minutes before the bridge was hit. What can you tell us?
Yeah, I want to outline a few things. Robert, good to be with you. First and foremost, I just heard from the Baltimore County executive. He told me that roughly 2 minutes elapsed between when the pilot and crew first notified Maryland authorities that something was wrong with the cargo container ship Dolly, and when that collision occurred at approximately 1:30 a.m. That is how quickly local law enforcement here had to jump into action in order to close down traffic to and from the bridge. We're also learning from local and federal law enforcement officials that The tugs on the dolly were loose prior to the collision that occurred, that it is standard operating procedure for the tugs to escort these large container ships out of the port, out of their docking station, but that it is not
Thanks for joining.
for an escort to be there when going under the Francis Scott Key Bridge. And so an important note there, and also key for law enforcement in the coming days, and specifically the NTSB, which has launched its independent investigation of this, is getting on board the ship. They were not able, NTSB, to get on the ship today to get those recorders to determine at what time did the power go off, at what time did the ship's controls really get out of whack here. I was told by law enforcement, by internal briefing papers, that there were alarms that rang out aboard the dolly, that the pilot and crews really had seconds to run a few system checks, and that it was at that moment that the system checks failed that they reached out and notified Maryland authorities.
This morning, Maryland Governor Wes Moore says the ship sent a mayday call after losing power. This enabled officials there to limit some traffic on the bridge before the crash.
I recognize that many of us are scared right now. And so I want to be very clear about where everything stands. We are still investigating what happened, but we are quickly gathering details. The preliminary investigation points to an accident. We haven't seen any credible evidence of a terrorist attack. Our administration is working closely with leaders from all levels of government and society.
Thanks for joining.
To respond to this crisis, and not but just by addressing the immediate aftermath, but also by building a state that is more resilient and a state that's more safe.
And I want to bring in Nicole Skanga for more on this story. She's on the ground near the scene of this collapse at this media checkpoint. Nicole, you've been there all morning. Hearing about this mayday call that happens before the bridge went down may indicate what led up to this whole incident.
Yeah, the city of Baltimore right now in shock, and a dramatic retelling from the governor just then about this mayday call. Now, CBS News has obtained an unclassified memo from the Department of Homeland Security that indicates the cargo ship had lost propulsion. It was a motor ship. It had lost propulsion. And the memo goes on to say that the vessel notified the Maryland Department of Transportation that they had lost control of the vessel and that a collision with the bridge was possible. Just moments ago, I asked the Baltimore mayor, Mayor Scott, about this moment. He said it was critical in order for emergency personnel to get to the scene and for law enforcement to push back any further traffic so that no one else crossed. So this mayday call, he says, saved many lives here in Baltimore.
So I want to speak briefly about the terrible incident and accident that happened in Baltimore this morning. At about 1:30, a container ship struck the Francis Scott Key Bridge, which I've been over many, many times, commuting.
Very historical.
From Delaware, either on train or by car. I've been in Baltimore Harbor many times. And the bridge collapsed, sending several people and vehicles into the water, into the river. And multiple U.S. Coast Guard units, which are stationed very nearby, thank God, were immediately deployed along with local emergency personnel. And the Coast Guard is leading the response to the port, where representatives from the Federal Highway Administration, the FBI, the Department of Transportation, the Army Corps of Engineers, as well as Maryland officials and Baltimore Police and Fire, are all working together to coordinate an emergency response. Officials at the scene estimate 8 people were unaccounted for still, not still, were unaccounted for. That number might change. 2 have been rescued, 1 without injury, 1 in critical condition. And the search and rescue operation is continuing for all those remaining as we speak. I spoke with Governor Moore this morning, as well as the Mayor of Baltimore, the county executive, both United States senators and the congressman. And my Secretary of Transportation is on the scene. I told them we're going to send all the federal resources they need as we respond to this emergency. I mean all the federal resources. And we're going to rebuild that port together. Everything so far indicates that this was a terrible accident. At this time, we have no other indication, no other reason to believe there was any intentional act here. Personnel on board the ship were able to alert the Maryland Department of Transportation that they had lost control of their vessel, as you all know and reported. As a result, local authorities were able to close the bridge to traffic before the bridge was struck, which undoubtedly saved lives. Our prayers are with everyone involved in this terrible accident and all the families, especially those waiting for the news of their loved one right now. I know every minute in that circumstance feels like a lifetime. You just don't know. It's just terrible. We're incredibly grateful for the brave rescuers who immediately rushed to the scene, and to the people of Baltimore. I want to say we're with you. We're going to stay with you as long as it takes. And like the governor said, you're Maryland tough, you're Baltimore strong, and we're going to get through this together. And I promise we're not leaving. Here's what's happening now. The search and rescue operation is our top priority. Ship traffic in the Port of Baltimore has been suspended until further notice, and we'll need to clear that channel before the ship traffic can resume. The Army Corps of Engineers is on the spot and is going to help lead this effort to clear the channel. The Port of Baltimore is one of the nation's largest shipping hubs, and I've been there a number of times as a senator and as a vice president. It handles a record amount of cargo last year. It's also the top port in America for both imports and exports of automobiles and light trucks. Around 850,000 vehicles go through that port every single year, and we're going to get it up and running again as soon as possible. 15,000 jobs depend on that port, and we're going to do everything we can to protect those jobs and help those workers. The bridge is also critical for travel, not just for Baltimore, but for the Northeast Corridor. Over 30,000 vehicles cross the Francis Scott Key Bridge on a daily basis. It's virtually it's one of the most important elements for the economy in the Northeast and the quality of life. My transportation secretary is there now. As I told Governor Moore, I've directed my team to move heaven and earth to reopen the port and rebuild the bridge as soon as humanly possible. And we're going to work hand in hand with the support of Maryland to support Maryland whatever they ask for. We're going to work with our partners in Congress to make sure the state gets the support it needs. It's my intention that the federal government will pay for the entire cost of reconstructing that bridge, and I expect the Congress to support my effort. This is going to take some time. The people of Baltimore can count on us, though, to stick with them at every step of the way until the port is reopened and the bridge is rebuilt. You know, we're not leaving until this job gets done. Not leaving until then. So I just want to say God bless everybody who everyone harmed this morning and their families. And may God bless the first responders, many of whom risked their lives.
March 23rd, 1977, Baltimore welcomed the Key Bridge, spanning across the Patapsco River, completing the eastern sector of I-695.
The bridge was a key part of, the skyline of our infrastructure. It knits together the fabric of communities.
Connecting Dundalk to Baltimore and Baltimore to the world. Construction on the 1.6-mile bridge started in 1972 to ease congestion throughout the city. Nicholas Redding, CEO and president of Preservation Maryland, says the estimated $110 million project filled a major void in transportation, shipping, and infrastructure.
They knew that there had to be a second crossing, and initially they thought that they would build a tunnel, but the reality was the tunnel was going to be too expensive, and this bridge would not only be cheaper, but would allow them to move a lot of materials in a pretty heavily congested area.
One of the longest truss bridges in the United States, named after Francis Scott Key, who was inspired to write the Star-Spangled Banner after witnessing the bombardment of Fort McHenry in 1814.
Because it's believed that Key was about 100 yards away, give or take, from the bridge itself when he was aboard ship and penned what would become our Star-Spangled Banner.
Also nestled between Fort Carroll, in its 47 years, the iconic bridge has undergone many changes, and perhaps the most notable, its expansion to the lanes leading up to it.
There was expansion efforts to make sure that there were 4 lanes meeting it on either side. So there have been upgrades, expansions done to this facility over the years.
Aiding the nearly 31,000 people that MDTA says traveled the bridge each and every day, and over 11 million a year.
Sometimes we take things like this for granted, and then when we lose them, we really see the impact quite profoundly. The effort to rebuild it is going to be equally historic because it's going to be a big effort to not only do that, but to do it quickly, safely,
And we want to take you now to Baltimore, where officials are giving an update on this morning's bridge collapse.
As well as Colonel Roland L. Butler Jr., Superintendent, Maryland State Police. Tonight we're going to hear from a brief statement from each of them on current updates. And after that, we'll be able to take a few questions, but we do need to keep it brief because we want to get these folks back to work. With that, I'd like to introduce Rear Admiral Shannon Cody.
Hey, good evening, everyone. First, I'd like to say thank you to all of the first responders that have come out today to assist in looking for these individuals. We've had tremendous support across the state and county and city and federal enterprise. You've seen for yourself the helicopters flying over, the small boats that are out there, the Coast Guard cutters out there, the boats that go back and forth, bringing people out.
Thanks for joining.
These individuals. So thank you to this entire community for helping in that regard. Second, I want to say thank you to the community for the outpouring of support to those first responders, and in particular the outpouring of support and prayers, support for the families of the 6 individuals. So I'd like to announce tonight that based on the length of time that we've gone in this search, the extensive search efforts that we've put into it, the water temperature, that at this point we do not believe that we're going to find any of these individuals still alive. And so this evening at around 7:30, we are going to suspend the active search and rescue efforts. Coast Guard's not going away. None of our partners are going away, but we're just going to transition to a different phase. And so I'm going to turn it over to Colonel Butler, please.
Good evening, and thank you all for being here. To echo the Admiral's comments here, we really appreciate the support from the community. To all the first responders here, we appreciate your patience in allowing us to do the best job possible and get the information as it comes up. At this point, as the Admiral said, we're going away from the search and rescue portion, so recovery operation. The changing conditions out there have made it dangerous for the first responders, the divers in the water. We will still have surface ships out overnight. At 0600 hours tomorrow, we're hoping to put divers in the water and begin a more detailed search to do our very best to recover those 6 missing people.
Thank you. With that, we have time for just a few questions. We know there's a lot of questions that still have to be answered, and we do have time for just a few. So if we could pick a few, please.
So do we think it's still just 6? There's talk of maybe other cars on the bridge.
All the information we have is 6 individuals. Yes, sir.
Can you go into detail about how difficult this might be for the recovery phase of this now? What kind of challenges are you up against?
Well, I'll start by saying I'm going to turn you over to the experts on diving. I'm not an expert on diving, but we've got very difficult water temperatures. You have structures from the bridge that are in the water that can move with the tides and currents, making that dangerous for divers and people in the water to actually try to do recovery. And we do not want to injure any of these first responders in this recovery effort. We absolutely want to be as safe as possible for everyone involved in this. And I'll see if Colonel Zorn has anything he wants to add.
Can you go into specifics about what the search and rescue entailed, like were there scuba divers or was everything above water, sonar, any sort of equipment that might have been utilized over the past 12 hours?
From the outset, we moved all those resources in with dive teams from various state, local, and county agencies. We also use sonar. We're doing our very best in some very difficult times and difficult conditions, which is why we're making that transition now. The last thing we want to do is put divers in the water with changing currents, low temperatures, very poor visibility, and so much metal and other unknown objects in the water. All it takes is one object to strike an individual, and all of a sudden we have a first responder trying to recover another first responder. I think at 0600 we'll find ourselves in a better position to understand the dynamics of what we're dealing with and to address the issue in a much safer manner.
Do the authorities have 6 IDs now, and have those victims each been contacted, those families I should say?
I can't speak on that. That's still in the investigative portion of this. All of that is unknown at this point, and as I said, we have to cease operations. We can't start again until we can assure the safety of those divers and the rescue personnel that are going to participate in this. If we look at how challenging it is at a simple motor vehicle crash to extract an individual, I'm sure we can all imagine how much harder it is to do it in inclement weather, when it's cold, under the water, with very limited to no visibility.
Just to clarify, no remaining have been removed thus far by search and rescue teams other than the two who were rescued by boaters.
That is correct.
So, Colonel, you're confident then that no other vehicles made it onto that bridge before the collapse, or as it was collapsing, I should say?
Based upon the fact the original information that was provided, the Maryland Transportation Authority Police Department was able to shut down traffic. Is there the possibility there was another vehicle on there other than those vehicles involved in the construction process? I think we all would have to understand, yes, that's a distinct possibility. As unfortunate as it may be, it's a distinct possibility. However, we don't have any information to support that at this point. Ma'am?
Bring the divers out. Do you have an idea of where the individuals are, if they were in cars or not, and do you know how long the recovery effort is going to take?
We do not know at this point. I'm sure as you've seen some of the aerial photos, there is a tremendous amount of debris in the water from containers hanging off ships. We have to make sure those are shored up. We're going to work with structural engineers to help them understand how to navigate and address the challenges of having bridge structure in the water that may be sharp, that could puncture a suit, that could puncture an airline. All of these are things that we must take our time with.
This last question.
I'm sorry? At this point, we do not know where they are, but we intend to give it our best effort to help these families find closure.
How might inclement weather tomorrow impact the recovery efforts?
Very clearly it could, but we're going to do everything in our power to help these families find closure.
How stable has this boat been? How stable has the boat been?
How do we get their names, title, spelling?
Folks, we're going to be establishing a unified command as well as a joint information center. And I know there's a lot of questions, and we're going to be providing that information where we will continue to provide updates. But that is the extent of our updates tonight. We thank you all for coming.
Thank you.
You've been listening to officials give an update on the major bridge collapse in Baltimore. The Coast Guard says the search and rescue operation is being suspended. It expects the 6 missing workers are likely dead. Linda Tran joins me now. She's a former senior advisor to Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. She is currently a partner at Epic Works Advisors, a consulting firm working in the transportation sector. Thanks so much for joining us. We just heard the search and rescue is being suspended. What does the rest of an investigation into an incident, obviously this is an extraordinary incident, but what else might it look like, the investigation into an incident like this?
Well, first of all, I think it's important to understand that there are two parallel but related processes that will be underway. So earlier today, we heard from Chair Jennifer Homendy and the National Transportation Safety Board, which will be looking into everything from the operations and safety protocols that were taking place all around the cargo vessel itself, as well as taking a look at the technology and any sort of forensic evidence that they can discover. At the same time, the U.S. Department of Transportation, the U.S. Coast Guard, and the Maryland Transportation Authority, you can expect they will, once the recovery effort has ended, they will be taking on additional information. They'll be dredging the waterways there to make sure that operations can get underway as quickly as possible. The responsibilities on the U.S. DOT side of things will be things like supply chain disruptions and making sure that the roadways are open and functioning as quickly and as responsibly as possible, while the NTSB continues to look at the safety implications, any sort of timeline and detailed protocol that will be a result of their discussions and the information that they discover.
And Linda, I want to ask you about that supply chain disruption. This has forced the Port of Baltimore to close indefinitely, and I just want to run through some of the statistics about the port. It handled $80 billion worth of cargo in 23. The port supports more than 15,000 jobs and is key to shipping things like cars and construction machinery. So, two questions really. How do you think officials with federal money or otherwise going to lessen the effects on the supply chain? And do you think there was any case or any instance in which the federal funds might be used to lessen the blow that this will have will levy on the actual workers at the docks and related to commerce through this area?
Well, look, John, it wasn't very long ago. You've heard the president, you've heard Secretary Pete talk about how we thought Christmas was going to be canceled. That obviously didn't come to pass. I have the good fortune and the bad fortune of being on the front lines of those discussions and the work that was done to make sure that those disruptions did not persist. However, it's important to know that our goods movement chain, the supply chain writ large, is still very fragile. And these kinds of impacts on, one of the nation's largest ports, which had, as far as I know, 40 inbound vessels today, 34 of them cargo vessels, that's going to have an impact. And some of the actions that you saw take place during the major disruptions just a couple of years ago, you can expect are going to come into play here. So you'll see diversions to the ports of Virginia, to New York, New Jersey, etc. And then also in terms of the actual traffic flows, there's some additional implications because it's Baltimore. So the trucks that are going to be most impacted, I believe there's something like 4,900 trucks that would come across the Francis Scott Key Bridge every single day. And those that are carrying liquids, dangerous chemicals, those sorts of things that cannot go into tunnels, they're going to have to do significant diversions, right? Approximately 30 miles in addition to what they would have been able to do on a regular basis if the tragedy hadn't happened with the bridge. So there are going to be some big shifts that we've seen happen in other circumstances over the last few years, but there's no doubt there's going to be a tremendous impact here.
Can you give us a sense of what that would feel like? So 11 million cars drive across the bridge every year. If that is now going to have to be diverted, you already mentioned some of the, you can't just take a new route if you're carrying materials that are hazardous and that can't go on those new roads. So what happens? Does capacity have to be upgraded in those other routes? Is it possible to give us a sense of what life might look like in other areas that are now going to have to handle all this traffic?
So we haven't seen this kind of a tragedy, John, so I'm not going to predict what exactly the local authorities are going to do. What I do know is that this is very interesting in terms of the turf and who's in charge. You've got federal officials involved, you've got state officials involved, you have the city as well as the county, and I know they're all talking to each other about how they're going to adjust their plans, how they're going to prioritize what sort of traffic flow happens, and how they're going to address this over the coming weeks.
Linda Tran, former senior advisor to Transportation Secretary Pete Buttigieg. Thanks so much for being with us.
We have been out here for hours now, 10 plus hours. And 10 hours ago when we first arrived, hundreds of people were out here trying to get a view for themselves to see what was left of the Key Bridge. Here we are at close to 8 o'clock, and people are still making their way over here, snapping photos, looking at it in disbelief, having trouble coming to grips that this is the reality that this state is now dealing with. And the worst nightmare has become a reality after the Coast Guard confirming just a short time ago that search and rescue has now turned to search and recovery for those 6 construction workers that are still missing tonight. It has been an outpouring of support, though, coming in from this community. And if there's one thing, as you both know, that Baltimore knows how to do and Maryland knows how to do better than anyone, that is coming together during a dire situation and a tragic time. And my colleague Jessica Albert, she's had a chance to see that firsthand with a vigil that was held tonight in Baltimore County, and that's where we pick our coverage up with right now. Jessica, good evening.
Good evening, Rick. That vigil came together in just a matter of hours, and like you said, it really just speaks to the spirit of Baltimore, of this community, of the entire state of Maryland. People here are going to look out for each other in tough times like these. I will tell you that there were a lot of people at this vigil, including the mayor and the county executive and several other leaders. It was held at Mount Olive Baptist Church. I spoke to the pastor this evening. He says he's hoping prayer and coming together will bring healing to the community and the loved ones of these construction workers who are now presumed dead. At tonight's vigil, community members also said a prayer for the first responders who have been out on that water all day long, searching for these construction workers and trying to find answers to what played out here in this community. I talked to several other community members who say that the Key Bridge and the body of water here in this area means so much to them. It's an iconic fixture, and now they're having to grapple with the fact that it is gone and that community members have also presumed to be dead at this point. This vigil, really something special. So many people coming together to lift each other up in prayer. Rick?
Jessica, excellent coverage. Thank you. As we get ready to wrap things up out here, multiple people still coming by to take a look at this. And it all happened at 1:30 this morning, and things quickly played out after that in terms of developments coming through, but still lots of unanswered questions that we're dealing with tonight. An investigation the NTSB said could take months and months and months to complete. They brought up another bridge accident and collapse that took them 2 years just to get some of the answers they were looking for. But those 6 construction workers, that is the big development here as we get into the later hours of the night, now presumed dead. Search and rescue has turned to search and recovery. So please, 6 men who we know came from overseas, living in the Dundalk and Highlandtown communities, simply just doing their job at 1:30 in the morning, and now presumed dead. Keep their families in their prayers, and as we continue to learn more about them, there will be ways to support them and their families. So please keep that in mind as we move forward here in the coming days.
From WBJL TV 11, this is breaking news.
And what a day it's been here in Baltimore. Been keeping an eye on the Key Bridge throughout the day. The scene there hasn't changed much, but the details have.
Yeah, we do know that they are still searching for 6 people, 6 construction workers who fell into the water when that collapse happened at 1:30 this morning. Tommy Clark is live in Dundalk right now. And Tommy, we just got an update. What can you tell us?
Well, you know, the AP is reporting 6 presumed dead, but I just spoke with the Coast Guard. I've been calling them. They have a few different ports I can call, and they are looking into it further for me. So I have not personally confirmed that, but that is the report from the AP. The last we heard is that this is still a search and rescue. Of course, this could be an update to this. You're watching this unfold live on air. So I'm texting and calling the Coast Guard, speaking with them about this. They're looking into it for me right now. That is according to what the AP is saying. You know, we've been here all day, 15 hours since this incident happened. We've had multiple press conferences, hearing from everyone from the governor to President Biden in the White House. We've had a couple different press conferences with Governor Moore, as well as one with the NTSB. That is who is leading this investigation, while the Coast Guard is leading the search and rescue efforts. That's why when it comes to the fatalities, if there are any, as we were saying earlier, that would be with the Coast Guard that would be telling us this. When it comes to the last press conference we had, they were sharing with Pete Buttigieg about what comes next here when it comes to this bridge, this major port that impacts so much of our country, not just the Northeast Corridor, but our entire country, and really internationally. You know, this boat, Dolly, is from Singapore. So we're going to see folks from Singapore who own this ship coming here. We're expected to see them in the coming days. We also have several teams within the NTSB working on this investigation from every angle. You know, they were explaining it earlier, saying they have someone here, an individual who is solely focused on human error. So they're seeing if there was human error in this. The latest update that we got had to do with the construction workers. We have not heard if there were anyone driving on that bridge. That has been the question that's been remaining all day, and something that officials have not been able to answer. Right behind me here, they've been bringing in several trailers. This is likely to help with a command post, not only for the investigation, but once they start rebuilding this. So I don't know if you can see behind me, we have a semi-truck going by with another trailer setting up here. So let's take a listen. When it comes to these press conferences, you know, Governor Moore speaking, the mayor, even, like I said, the president. Let's take a listen first to what the governor was saying, you know, speaking with the first responders. Take a listen.
Everybody has stepped up. Everybody has raised their hands to serve. And I can tell you, it is so deeply appreciated. It's so deeply felt. And for everyone who is offering prayers and supports, I can tell you those prayers are working.
The NTSB then telling us about, you know, this focus is on the search and rescue. Throughout, we've had several press conferences here in Dundalk at the staging area. And each press conference we've had, we've asked about what comes next. And they've said, you know, our focus is on the search and rescue. Take a listen to what NTSB, the leaders in this investigation, what they're telling us today.
What's the priority beyond the search and rescue? We don't, you know, certainly investigations are a priority. Certainly environmental considerations are a priority. And So is traffic and getting, cargo vessels in and out of the port of Baltimore. It's not the NTSB's priority. We have a number of organizations, including the Department of Transportation, Maryland Department of Transportation, the governor that's doing a lot of work on that. But this is it. Right now, it's about people. It's about families and addressing the needs of those that were impacted. That's the focus. I don't think anybody in that room right now at the command post is thinking about what are the next steps to get things cleaned up. They're working to figure out who was impacted, if anyone was impacted, and how do we address that, because that is and should be the priority always.
Governor Moore says that he's been speaking with those families of those involved. Again, the number we've been hearing all day, NTSB is not confirming, but local officials have confirmed 8 individuals involved here. 2 rescued, 1 did not want to get medical attention. The other individual was taken to shock trauma, and we've heard has since been released. That means that they're looking confirmed for 6 people in this incident, at least. Again, waiting to hear about anyone driving on that bridge at the time. The governor says that authorities were able to stop some drivers who were about to go on the bridge. But other than that, we haven't been told if anyone was in fact driving, if any cars went into the water. And that is why there are still helicopters overhead, divers in the water working on this investigation. This is going to be a long process, guys. So we've been hearing from all these different officials as they work together to get out the pertinent information here, especially the search and rescue. That is the big point right now. But I'm sure, in the coming hours even, that is going to change. So I'm going to keep speaking with the Coast Guard. I have had a couple phone call conversations with them, and I'll keep you guys updated. But for now, back to you.
All right, Tommy, thank you. The video still gets me when you see the ship and lights go off, lights come back on, and that smoke. I mean, it's just odd to watch all this sort of play out right in front of you.
And it's so fast too.
Yeah.
From 1 second you see the ship, like Tolly was showing us through that video.
Right,
the smoke is there, and then it literally falls within seconds.
Yeah.
So it's just incredible.
Yeah. We mentioned here a little bit about divers with Tommy, and that's a big part of all of this.
Huge. Yeah, the search and rescue teams, they've been going through the water to try and find the missing crew members. Andre Hepkins joining us now from the Olympics Live Desk with those efforts ongoing right now.
In addition, Ashley, our own Brianna Ross is actually volunteering with her church to help feed those first responders and divers. Take a look at this video that she shot from the scene. According to Baltimore City Fire spokesperson Kevin Cartwright, at least 50 divers are on the scene.
Wow.
The Anne Arundel County Fire Department, the Prince George's County Fire Department, as well as other local volunteer companies. State Police Trooper dive teams are also on the scene. And we're looking at this video right now. According to Kevin Cartwright, the teams are using side-scan sonar and infrared technology to locate and identify the vehicles that fell when the Francis Scott Key Bridge collapsed into the Patapsco River. And if these dive teams find anyone
Thanks for joining.
inside these vehicles, they will secure the cars with a buoy. Already, we're told they've identified a truck that's in 2 parts, and they believe there are others. Ashley.
Wow.
Sorry, Andre. There's still a big question you're hearing. The conflicting information, at least from Tommy earlier. How many are they looking for, and how many will end up being in the water there?
It's still developing.
I know the NTSB is meeting at 5 o'clock tonight. Maybe they'll get some more information. They haven't told us when the next press conference will be, but we're hoping soon to try to parse all that out.
Sure. Also getting some updates now from shock trauma about a patient that they had treated there. We were learning just a little bit as it's been coming out. That patient released.
Yeah, thankfully. And let's go back to 11 News anchor Deborah Wiener. Deb, what do we know right now?
Boy, doesn't that speak to the miracle of what they do at shock trauma, that they received a critically injured patient who is now home. It's really extraordinary. So here's what we know. As we know, shock trauma sees 6,000 to 7,000 people coming in every year. If they can handle anything, we know they can. So they received word at 2 a.m. that there was a mass casualty event. They then notified authorities.
Thanks for joining.
Critically injured individuals. At 2:30 in the morning, they received one of those critically injured individuals who was in fact on that bridge. Take a listen to what they had to say. Next.
Shortly after that, we started getting telephone calls from faculty and staff who were aware that the incident had occurred, who were not on call, but were calling to see if they could be useful to come in and volunteer. This is something that happens quite regularly. Around 2:30 a.m., the patient arrived, and we began taking care of him at that point. We also have been and continued to be in communication with the first responders in the field to get some idea of what was going on the scene. We also were monitoring the Maryland State Police Aviation Command's helicopters and looking at flight patterns to see and to be notified if any of them were bringing patients to us at that point.
We prepare for this. Unfortunately, these disasters occur, and we train and prepare and drill for this exercise, not just managing the care, the acute clinical care, but mobilizing the different resources, so many moving pieces, as Dr. Cundy and Efron mentioned, to accommodate as many possible patients effectively and efficiently as possible.
I'll tell you, when you hear them discussing how they prepare for this, how they drill for this, you certainly appreciate that. But how can one prepare and drill for the image that we have all seen like over and over and over again since early this morning? It's really extraordinary. I know we've been discussing this all day, that no matter how many times you see it, you're still incredulous.
Wow.
This iconic bridge named after Francis Scott Key.
Just like a movie.
Iconic bridge would topple in seconds before our very eyes. So many questions still to be asked, to be answered, and certainly that individual who was sent to shock trauma in the wee hours of the morning and who is now home has an extraordinary story to tell of survival and of trauma, and we certainly wish them well in their continuing work.
My.
Just cannot imagine the story that individual has to tell. Yes.
I mean, it's just like the story of the neighbor that you had earlier. You don't think about it, but you say, listen, the life of Baltimore runs through Dundalk. You don't think about it until this, and you understand everything. What Kate said, everything from toilet paper to cars comes through that terminal.
It is. And not only for us, but really for the entire country. I mean, it is one of the biggest ports. So big impacts all over the place. Thank you. 11 News reporter Kate Amara joins us live now as well. And Kate, there's a mass tonight for the people involved in the collapse. What can you tell us about that?
That's exactly right. It's at 5:30. It's at the Cathedral of Mary Our Queen. It's praying for all those who've been impacted by this accident. And I'll tell you, somebody who is probably thrilled to hear that one of the two people rescued has been released from shock trauma is Jesus Campos, and that explains why we haven't seen him around here. He kind of disappeared about an hour ago. I went to look for him to ask him some follow-up questions. He is the man that we've been speaking to today, who works for Bronner Builders, the company that was contracted to have the work crew on the bridge today. He has been distraught. He said that it was a 7-member crew. The one member that was rescued, he said, was in critical condition at the hospital the last he knew. And he said the families of the other 6 of his friends, co-workers, and he called them family members at this point, their families were just sitting at home, he said, waiting for the call. He's the one who gave us a lot of the details about this crew that was doing road work, pothole work, according to state officials. He said it's a job he's done before for the company. He believes their shift was 9 p.m. to 5 a.m., that they shut down parts of the roadway across the Key Bridge at 9 last night so that this work could take place, and that this crew of 7 was supposed to be, sorry if it's windy back here, was supposed to be on until 5 o'clock in the morning. He told us at the time of the collapse, they were on a 30-minute break, which is standard. It's how they operate. And that what they do on a break is they take their breaks in their cars. Pickup trucks, actually, he said there would have been 4 of them, and that his friends and co-workers would have been in their cars. Some eat something, drink a little bit of water or something. Some close their eyes. He said it's very hard, strenuous work. And he said Jesus and his other colleagues who are not working on this shift are just beside themselves. They know how dangerous and precarious it can feel to be that high up.
Thanks for tuning in.
That bridge that he said feels like it's moving up and down all the time, but then
He said they just can't imagine what it was like to be on that bridge. So we did speak to him and through an interpreter. He was very gracious. He was very emotional as well. But we want to share a little bit with you of what Jesus Campos told us today. I am so bad. I feel so bad right now that this has happened. Mr. Campos told us 3 of the men were from Mexico and were related to each other. He said 2 were from Guatemala, the rest from Honduras and El Salvador. We asked him, what do you want people to know about your friends and about what happened?
No, pues eran buenas personas y somos buenas personas, ¿verdad?
They were good people. They were good workers, he said. They were working so that they could send money home to their countries.
Sí, pues demasiado, pues porque tenemos.
Everyone, please like, share, subscribe, and thanks for
Too much to
watching.
bear right now because all the families are waiting at home